All right, good evening. We're talking today again from Studio 815. So we're here at the Smart Board. We have a special guest today, expert fourth grade government student. Who are we talking to?
Rory Kuhn.
Yes, Rory's going to talk to us about the Supreme Court and some of what goes into the selection of a Supreme Court nominee. Now, Rory, are you eligible to be on the Supreme Court?
Yes.
And the answer is that is a correct answer because to be on the Supreme Court, you basically have to be nominated by the president and approved by the Senate. There are no age requirements, no citizenship requirements, nothing. Because the theory is if the president nominates and the Senate approves, that person is qualified. All right, here we have last year's free response. So we'll start with this one and then we'll walk you through the notes. All right, the judicial branch is often assumed to be insulated from politics. They love to ask about this insulated from politics. However, politics affects many aspects of the judiciary. As we know, politics equals power. All right, so when we're talking about getting power, using power, we're talking about anything that is political. All right, now Rory, can you tell me anything you know about the Supreme Court?
There are 9 judges.
Very good. All right, 9 judges. And how long do they have the job for?
Their entire life.
Correct. You have a lifetime appointment when you're there. All right, now the first question I asked you to do is describe two political factors. Okay, now you can do three, but you got to do at least two to get the points. Two political factors that affects president's decisions when to appoint members to the judiciary. Okay, so when a president makes that decision, now President Obama has made two appointees, and there's talk he might make one more before this term is out because one of the justices, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, has cancer and is very ill. So you may see one more of these in the Obama administration, barring any sudden deaths or resignations or anything like that. All right, also, we're going to identify that's your bullet point. These are just short sentence phrases that are two political factors that affect the confirmation process of a president's nominees and explain how each factor complicates a confirmation. All right. So, Rory, if you were President Obama and you were appointing someone to the Supreme Court, what would you look for in the qualifications?
Well, I'd look for people who are willing to devote their whole life to being in being there. So
All right, so you want somebody with experience, all right? Somebody that's been a judge before or somebody has legal experience. You don't have to be a judge, but that sometimes does help. Okay, very good. All right, so this is an identify and an explain question. So this is going to be worth 4 points, okay, on this. This was a very complicated rubric to grade back in June. I didn't grade this one, but the people that did were very upset, and it took a long time to grade. All right, then we're going to explain. So this is where our longer writing comes in. When we explain, we're looking at how and why. All right. One legislative power that serves as a check on court decisions. All right. Most people think the Supreme Court decisions are final, but the Supreme Court can be checked by the legislative branch. And then we're going to explain how one executive power serves as a check on court decisions as well. Okay. So you have 2 points, 4 points, 1 point, 1 point. Okay. We'll get into the checks and balances later. What this notes are going to focus on is the what factors into the president's decisions and then factors that affect the confirmation process. Okay, and you'll notice that these are actually can be double dip answers. All right, so president's going to appoint somebody based on their race, perhaps, and then their race can then affect the confirmation process as well. So this is when you can double dip on. All right. Now take a look at this cartoon here. All right. Let's see if how Rory can do with this cartoon. Rory, who is this person all the way on the left? All right, that is talking to the woman with the Harvard shirt on.
I think is it Barack Obama?
Correct. That is President Obama. All right, and he has appointed Elena Kagan to the Supreme Court. All right. Now, Rory, can you read the cartoon or read the call out for us on the cartoon?
Nice to see growing diversity on the Supreme Court.
Okay, now diversity. When we talk diversity, we're looking for different people. So we have an African American on the court, we have a woman, another woman, and a bunch of white males. All right, now this cartoon is not addressing that kind of diversity. What do you notice, Rory, about the shirts that all of them have?
They're all colleges.
Which two?
Um, Yale and Harvard.
Okay, so he's appointing another Harvard lawyer to the bench when we already have Harvard and Yale lawyers already. All right. Now, Sam Alito actually went to Princeton, but who's keeping score of that one? Okay. All right, so according to the cartoon, what is the criticism of Elena Kagan's nomination to the Supreme Court? All right, pause your video and let's see if you come up with the right answer. And the criticism here is the diversity of law schools represented is limited on the court. Sorry, you can't read the rest of the question there. Okay, so Harvard and Yale basically dominate the Supreme Court and the lawyers there. And again, Alito being a Princeton one, you pretty much have to have an Ivy League law background, but even though that's not a requirement, there are some Stanford lawyers. Anthony Kennedy went to Stanford, so it's actually not the best cartoon, but you definitely see the educated elites making the court there. All right, next question. This is one you might see on the AP exam down the road. Okay, what is a litmus test? Now, to you all, litmus test is something used in science. All right. By the way, I will give 2 extra credit points to the first student that can write litmus test on the word wall in class. That will tell me who's watching this and paying attention. All right. We know it's not a science experiment. All right. We know judges do not have to make an application to be on the bench. All right. Nickname for the grilling questions asked by the Senate Judiciary Committee, possibility. Test presidents used to test the nominee's position on an important issue, or a test used by judges anytime they rule on an issue on an EPA regulation. There's the funny Kuhn answer that I have to do to make 5 choices. Correct answer is D. Okay, it's a test presidents used to test the nominee's position on an important issue. All right, Rory, name an important issue facing our government that might be facing the Supreme Court in the near future. What's a controversial issue in American society? All right. Well, Rory meant to say there was abortion. All right. All right. Abortion is an issue that's often controversial on this one. So if a president is using a litmus test, they are going to see what that nominee's position is on abortion. If it agrees with the president, then they clear the hurdle and that president will consider them for the nominee. So currently, if Obama is using a litmus test, which presidents all say they don't use litmus tests, Obama would say, are you pro-life or pro-choice? All right. So I'm going to ask Rory that question. Are you pro-life or pro-choice?
Pro-life.
President Obama would not nominate you for the Supreme Court because you do not agree with his position or policy. All right, for that one. So he would look for pro-choice nominees. George Bush did the same thing with pro-life nominees. All right. Should the Supreme Court justice have life tenure? This is more of an opinionated question. You can banter that about on your Facebook page that I don't know about. All right. Now, higher visibility and importance of the court demands the president give greater attention to the nomination of Supreme Court judges. Notice he also appoints Court of Appeals judges and district court judges. Now, earlier you learned about senatorial courtesy as one of those informal amendments to the Constitution. That does not apply only to district court judges. Will he use that one? Senatorial courtesy is a little too important for a Supreme Court nominee. Right? Presidents only make appointments to the court if a vacancy occurs during their term, and they often consider roughly 6 things. All right? I want you to write all 6 of these down. Make sure you remember at least 2, because if you look on that question, they asked you 2 things for that one. Okay? All right. So first thing a president's going to consider is race, gender, religion, and region. They kind of lump these all together. Okay? Clarence Thomas, as you see here, okay, is on what is called the black seat, all right, because Thurgood Marshall held it. Clarence Thomas then was appointed to fill that seat. Should he retire or pass away, probably another African-American will take that seat, okay? Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who you can barely see over here, occupies what's called the Jewish seat, all right, where a Jewish person was appointed back in the 1920s, I believe, and ever since then a Jewish justice has held that seat. But she's also a female, so that kind of goes both ways. And now Elena Kagan, being female and Jewish, has that maybe a second Jewish seat that's added to the court as well. A lot of people think Obama appointed Kagan for that reason because he doesn't have score a lot of points with Jewish voters, so that was his way to kind of reach out to them. Okay, Sandra Day O'Connor, who you see here, was the first female Supreme Court justice appointed in 1981. Okay, moving down the list, they look at experience. They want to see what these judges have done before. Sometimes district court judges. Most of the judges come from the Court of Appeals, and there's actually a D.C. Court of Appeals we'll learn about on Wednesday, more than likely, which is where 3 of the 9 justices have come from, because the D.C. Court of Appeals only hears cases that come from Sorry, there's an announcement there. Only come from cases from the bureaucratic agencies like the SEC, FCC, and so on. So since they always rule on federal issues, they know their positions. They're usually not as controversial. Okay? All right, our next slide, all right, talks about the litmus test. All right, already went over that. All right, so the president will test the nominee's position on a certain issue. Right? If they pass the litmus test, they get the job. If they don't, the president will not consider them. Okay? Nobody ever uses this because it minimizes what their qualifications are, but it's pretty much an unwritten rule in the Supreme Court process. Probably in the 1800s, the litmus test would have been slavery, for example. Okay? They're also going to look at acceptability. All right? We want to see how likely are these people to be accepted by the Senate, because the Senate must confirm them. All right, we know it's 60, but it's really 51 votes and they get the job. So you want non-controversial people, people that are going to be accepted by both parties. Okay, you want to make sure the committee is going to do that. So you might pick somebody from a state where one of the nominees is from, perhaps. And then all nominees are rated by the ABA. All right, ABA, do we know what that stands for? All right, that's the American Bar Association, which is made up of attorneys. All right, and then those lawyers are going to rate them well qualified, qualified, or not qualified. All right, now presidents in the past have used this as a basis for whether they appoint someone or not. But when Clarence Thomas, the one with the sexual harassment case we talked about, was given a rating of not qualified, George Bush and then Robert Dole, the guy who ran in '96 to take on Clinton, said they will not use the ABA rating anymore because the ABA, being a group of lawyers, is a little bit left-leaning, and they're not going to always rate the conservative judges as high. But every other nominee has been rated well qualified, with the exception of Clarence Thomas. Okay, so they consider it, but it's no longer a dominant issue moving forward. All right. And then this is a question that might help you down the road. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Which of the following is not an activity engaged in by interest groups to influence a Senate's vote on a nominee? Because interest groups are very passionate about Supreme Court nominees and they get very active. So pause this for a second. And let's go through here, okay? Rating their qualifications to be a justice. Yes, we know that's wrong because the ABA does that. Will they lobby members of the Judiciary Committee? Definitely. Lobbying is the main tactic used by interest groups. Will they contribute to the campaigns of individual senators? Of course they will, all right? Through their, yes, you guessed it, Political Action Committee, okay? Run a series of TV ads in opposition to the nominee. They will do that also, okay? It's called going public. And then the last one is contributing to the Speaker of the House's PAC. Now, can you tell me why the Speaker of the House will not really need contributions from an interest group about the Supreme Court? And the answer? The House has nothing to do with the selection. It would be the Senate Majority Leader that you would make a contribution to. All right? So that closes our lesson for today. All right, thank you for listening. I will see you all on Monday. And come with questions. And again, first person to write litmus test on the word wall, a few extra points because we want to make sure we know that term. All right, enjoy your weekend.